All right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. I'm Spencer Taylor. Week 8 of the 2025 season for the NFL has just concluded Monday night. So this is going to be my reaction to that. So before I go into it, please hit subscribe if you want to see more future NFL content from me. And without any further ado, let's get into my reaction to Week 8. So my predictions for the week. Had a pretty decent week. Not my best week, though. You'll see outright picking winners. I went 9-4 for predictions this week, and then betting against the spread, I went 7-6. So positive on both, but certainly more positive for picking winners outright, which I'm actually doing pretty good. As you can see, compared to the general public on ESPN that is doing these predictions, I'm in the 98th percentile, so pretty high up as far as averages and being able to predict winners. And then not the greatest record overall against the spread, but still percentile wise against anybody else that is doing these same predictions. I'm doing pretty good. I'm certainly above average when betting against the spread. And of course, if you did see my shorts video on Sunday giving you my favorite bets of the week, you'll know that those didn't go quite as I might have hoped or desired. Those didn't go quite to plan. Bit of a cursed list of bets. Now, I do want to say those bets were not all the bets I made this week or all the predictions I made. They were just a small handful that I shared that at the time felt like my favorite, the ones that I was most confident in. It just so happened to be that the bets I was most confident in didn't hit, and then the ones I was least confident in, a lot of those were the ones that hit, and thankfully I hit on enough of those that I ended up coming out positive on returns for my bets for the week. So had a positive week overall, but those favorite bets I had shared with you, Bears plus 6.5, didn't work out at all. I'll get into that more certainly. Steelers plus 3.5, that also didn't work. I had two bets on over-unders for the Falcons Dolphins. I had the over, that one hit the under, and then on the Broncos Cowboys game, I had the under on that one hit the over. And then I had also talked about interception bets with Tua Tagovailoa and Cam Ward. I had talked about how you could bet those separately or as a parlay. If you bet those as a parlay, it would have lost because, of course, of all weeks, Tua Tagovailoa decided to play amazing with a swollen shut eye, only one eye, and, against a Falcons team that so far this season has played much better. Tua decided to not throw any picks this week finally and throw 4 touchdowns instead. I don't know. The Falcons make no sense week to week this season, and the Dolphins, out of nowhere, just decided to play really good on offense and on defense this week. So, so as far as interception parlays go, with Tua and Cam Ward, wouldn't have worked as a parlay, but just betting the two individually, at least the bet on Cam Ward throwing an interception, that one did pay off. I had a couple, I had a favorites money line parlay that hit. That included the Patriots, Bills, the Eagles, and then I had the Chiefs at minus 5.5 and the Colts at minus 5.5. Had all 5 of those in a parlay. That hit. I also had an underdog parlay, but that was long odds. Didn't work out. That one I didn't really expect to work out. Anyways, it would have been a huge payoff. So I didn't lose much of anything on that one because I didn't bet much on it. So beyond the betting, let's get into some of these games. We'll go through. I'm not going to touch on every game this week because really, if you watch the games, or even if you've looked at the box scores, this week, not really the best week as far as, fun, entertaining, close games. We had very few of those this week. And a lot of media, national media, the common thing to attribute this to is going to be, oh, well, we're in the middle of the season. We're at the point where teams are starting to separate, which I do think that is very much the case. I think we are starting to see the cream rise to the top a little bit. I do think that is playing a factor a little bit here with some of these games this week. It also helps, or didn't help, that this week was by Mageddon, in that we had the most possible teams on a bye, so we had a lot fewer games than you might have on a late season week or early season when there are no byes. We had a lot of teams on bye weeks this week, so fewer games to go around. And the thing that I think is a little bit under talked about here is this week there was a lot of cross-conference games. So a lot of games that were played between an AFC opponent and an NFC opponent, which means that these are teams that don't see each other very often. These are teams that might only see each other, every couple, 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 years. So, we had a lot of matchups between teams that aren't very acquainted with each other. For example, with the Bears and the Ravens. They played, the Bears going up against the Ravens, having expected that Lamar was going to play. Lamar, for example, the players, coaching staff that are on the Bears, most, if any of them, will not have played against Lamar and the Ravens, at least not in their time with the Bears. So, that just goes to show you that, these cross-conference matchups happen so infrequently that you're quite often going to have most of your roster on a lot of these teams who have never played that opponent, at least with the current franchise. So that can create a little bit of, I feel like with that, the reason I think that matters is if you've got a really good opponent from the AFC, for example, and a lesser opponent and a lesser team from the NFC, it's going to be easier for that AFC team to get the upper hand on the NFC team, vice versa. It doesn't necessarily matter on the conference, but you get my point. Strong team versus weak team. It's the NFL. It's possible every week for upsets, or at least for the underdog to cover the spread and make it close. But it's a lot more easy for that to happen when it's a division rivalry game or even a matchup that is within a conference where it's teams that play each other more often. They're more familiar with each other, that kind of thing. So a couple interesting facts I wanted to get into with these games. We'll go through as we get to them. Really, I already mentioned the Dolphins-Falcons game. Really weird. Dolphins dominated pretty much the whole game on the road in Atlanta, winning 34-10. Honestly, the Falcons at this point, they're just a really weird team this year. They're really hard to predict, pretty much an every other week team at this point. They do really good, and then the next week they do really bad, and it almost doesn't seem to matter who they're playing against. It's really weird. Now, to be fair for the Falcons this week, I think part of it was that Michael Penix wasn't able to play, and they did start Kirk Cousins for the first game this year that he came in and played. And, for Kirk Cousins, I'm not a Kirk Cousins hater by any means, but he's certainly, there's a reason he's not a starting quarterback in the league right now. He's not a young quarterback anymore. And what he's been good at in the past is, he's one of those timing type quarterbacks. He's not a runner. He's one of the few left that's kind of a pocket passer. Certainly, at the age that he's at now, he's not much of a runner. But this week with the Falcons, Cousins just had a lot of passes that were off target or, bad timing, which to some extent that just comes with, playing with a bunch of guys in the first team starters that, you haven't been practicing with, you haven't been getting that time on task with. And so, yeah, Cousins just looked off, and again, he's not the most athletic quarterback, so if you can get pressure on him, makes it tough on him. And then also, really what happened for the Dolphins is because Cousins was in there and isn't very athletic, all the Dolphins really had to do was they shut down the run, shut down Bijan Robinson, who of course is like the star of the offense for the Falcons. The Dolphins were able to get him stopped up a bit, and then from there it made the Falcons one-dimensional, kind of forced the Falcons to try to beat them through the air, which again, just Kirk Cousins, bit older, certainly not the best quarterback ever, and having not had time on task with the starters to get in a rhythm, it just was a perfect recipe for the Dolphins to win. And that is kind of what their defense is built for in the Dolphins. They're meant to score a lot of points, get out to a lead, and let their pass rushers go wreak havoc. They just, on offense, the Dolphins just haven't been able to do anything, haven't been able to get out of their own way, especially sometimes thanks to Tua. But again, he was able to play just fine, hit Jalen Waddle plenty of times, again, with one eye swollen, basically shut. It was a really weird game. Bills, Panthers, this was one of the mini games. Wasn't close at all. Andy Dalton starting this week for the Panthers. Didn't play well at all. This was one of the many favorites that was favored by a lot that did cover. It was a pretty good week for favorites this week. We'll come back to the Bears-Ravens game, of course. Texans pretty much dominated the 49ers. Felt like the injuries for the 49ers starting to catch up more and more with them. And a Texans team that's desperate for wins, that's, clawing their way back from, a bad start to the season. And now they're one game away from being 500. So they're working their way up. Still certainly some valid concerns for the Texans. I still don't think they look great on offense. But they've got a good defense, and the offense is getting things going a little bit. You're missing top wide receivers there. But at home, desperate against a 49ers team that is riddled with injuries. It was a good game for the Texans. Also, sneaky odd fact for the 49ers is the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan, in weeks after a win, they quite often are, anytime they've gotten a win, the week after, they have a really bad record against the spread, and even outright not the best record. Just not a team under Shanahan that has been able to be good at winning multiple games in a row, and certainly not in covering the spread. They've also been one of the most injured teams in the league during Kyle Shanahan's time, so some of that could be part of it. The next game here, Giants-Eagles. Of course, the Giants-Eagles game, the two biggest storylines out of this are for the New York Giants. Got to feel bad for the Giants and for Giants fans, and especially for Cam Skattebo. Reason being, Skattebo playing great these last few weeks, especially since Jackson Dart began starting for the Giants. Those two have really been lighting it up, been playing pretty well, and really gotten some excitement going for the city of New York. But unfortunately, on the road in Philly this week, Cam Skattebo just pretty unlucky, pretty gruesome looking injury. If you haven't seen it, basically dislocated ankle. Just kind of bad luck in a tackle. His foot basically got twisted to the side. Didn't look very great. So Cam Skattebo is going to be out for the rest of the season. They lost him about midway through the game, so that certainly hurt them in this game. And then the other thing that's going to be talked about from this Eagles-Giants game is the tush push. Yet again, we had another week of just more and more piling evidence of why this play is dead after 2025. And it's not because it's impossible to beat. Again, that was one of the main reasons in this past offseason to try to ban it was, hey, it's too hard to beat. Obviously, that reasoning didn't win. There's enough people in the league and around it as fans, including myself, that did argue that, hey, if it's, with the fact that the Eagles are the only team in the league that's been able to do the tush-push effectively, it's not fair to ban it just because you can't figure out how to stop it or replicate it. If the Eagles are so good at doing it, learn how to beat it. But the problem is this year in 2025, the evidence has been growing more and more. Even looking back retrospectively now on some of the past tush pushes of just the play is nigh impossible to officiate correctly. There's plenty of plays from this year and from past years where false starts happened in tush-push plays where the refs weren't able to catch it. And then in this week's game, almost worse in my opinion, was you had, normally with the tush-push, what'll happen is Jalen Hurts will often go inside the pile and go kind of under. He'll get kind of pushed under defenders and things like that. But this week, in one of the attempts that they had, it wasn't on the goal line. That's the other thing, too, is sometimes the tush-push just happens on the goal line. As soon as Jalen Hurts has broken the plane, just like with any touchdown, it's called the touchdown, plays over, that good. But with this one that's getting talked about, it was on a third or fourth and short, I'm not sure. Regardless, it was closer to the middle of the field. I believe it was a fourth and short. And the Eagles went for it on a tush push. And what happened was this time Jalen Hurts ended up closer to the top of the pile, and he extended. And like what we see with a lot of tush push plays, there was a bit of a push. The momentum stopped just for a millisecond, and then the Eagles got a second push and went forward. And usually with this tush push, the officials have allowed that to happen. They haven't blown the play dead and stopped it for forward progress or anything. Usually they let it play out. In this game, unfortunately, the referees decided to go with calling the play dead for forward progress when they really shouldn't have. Because what happened was Jalen Hurts reaches the ball over, they get a push, it slows it down a little bit, then a second push, and he goes even further, does get the yardage needed for the first down, but isn't touched down yet. He hasn't touched the ground at all, not a knee, a hand, any of that kind of stuff to actually count him down. He hasn't been hit down yet, and the ball got knocked out of his hands, and Kayvon Thibodeau for the Giants recovers the ball. And then a whistle was blown. And so, of course, the Giants think, okay, well, we got a fumble recovered. It should be our ball, right? And the referees ended up saying, hey, no, we blew the whistle for forward progress. It's not a fumble. Eagles get the first down. So that's a play that is going to get talked about a lot this week, and I'm sure going throughout this season. It's just one more example of the referees struggling mightily to officiate this play in a fair manner. And again, to the referees' credit, we do have to understand what we see on the telecasts and on TV with the slow motion and all that is a lot better than what these officials get to work with just being on the field with their eyes. There's a lot going on. There's a lot that each individual official has to keep track of. And so it can be hard to officiate any given play, but the tush push where you have both teams scrummed up together and you only have a little line down the line to see, who's offsides, who's starting when. There's a lot going on all in one compact space, and all the referees kind of have to stand in a distance around it. So it's kind of hard for the officials to really get the best calls live on the field. Now, of course, we do have instant replay. We do have challenge flags, that kind of thing, which you would think should help. But, there's limitations to what they can do with that, partially just because of different rules and bylaws. And so, it's become plenty clear. Basically all the rules analysts for the different networks have talked about it. Officials have openly talked about it this year. It's very openly known that it's a play that's become too difficult for the league to officiate properly. And so it's pretty much a guarantee after the 2025 season, the tush push is going to get banned in one way or another. So, this game, Eagles did win. They did dominate for the most part, but, there were moments where the Eagles made it interesting, had some life. And again, certainly if Cam Skattebo could have stayed healthy, some moments like that with the officiating, if a couple breaks could have gone the Giants' way, they could have kept this game a lot closer, maybe even won it. It was interesting the last time these two teams played a few weeks ago. But yeah, nonetheless, Eagles get the win at home. Just yet another team this week that was a favorite by quite a bit, and they still won and covered. And then the next game, this was really the one and only close game that was also a upset. Really, this was it. And it was two teams that, it was the Who Cares Bowl. I'm sure a lot of people didn't even watch this game. But the New York Jets get their first win of the season to go 1-7. They cover the spread, which was a huge spread, -6.5 for the Bengals. This was one of the few where I was right on the spread, wrong on my pick. I figured this was going to be a close game, but I figured that the Bengals were going to win it with that high-scoring offense and with the Jets just having many close games this season that they just couldn't figure out a way to win it in the end. This one was different. The Jets were able to get the win, so congrats to them. I'm happy for all involved, especially Justin Fields. He's been getting taken through the ringer, including by the Jets owner in Woody Johnson. Terrible owner, in my opinion. There's a lot of terrible owners. A lot of the dysfunctional franchises year to year. Chances are, if they're dysfunctional year to year, they've got bad ownership. But the Jets, in my opinion, are one of those teams that have one of the worst ownership groups. And Woody Johnson, just, rich billionaire that owns the team, but dude likes to say a lot of crazy stuff that, and there's plenty of reporting about things behind the scenes that he's done over the years that are just not conducive to a good, healthy work environment, which, despite what you might believe, is important to having a good, successful team year over year. And he had been openly bashing Justin Fields as their quarterback leading up to this game. Sure, Justin Fields hasn't played well this season, but, it's been pretty clear that it wasn't necessarily Aaron Glenn that necessarily wanted Justin Fields maybe at quarterback. In the offseason, Woody Johnson sounded like he was pretty in support of Justin Fields being brought on. From what I understand, it was the general manager of the Jets that wanted Justin Fields. But for Woody Johnson to say some of the disparaging stuff he was saying about Fields, and Woody even admitted yesterday after the game that, maybe I shouldn't have said some of the things I said, which is like, come on, dude. You own the team. Like, the bad record is on you, to some extent. Your franchise hasn't been to the playoffs in how many years? You've had how many coaches, how many quarterbacks come through there? There's a reason that even Aaron Rodgers came through for 2 years and looked horrible, is now with another team and looks pretty good again. There's a reason that kind of stuff happens. So yeah, for the Jets though, especially for the fans and for the players and that staff, congrats to them on getting the win. Probably not going to get very many of those this season, but for that, it was really the most entertaining game of the week. Patriots-Browns, another dominating game. Drake May looking really good. Admittedly looking like quite possibly, so far, one of the best quarterbacks from the 2024 draft class. Buccaneers at the Saints. This was another dominant one. Saints were just lifeless. Ended up bringing in Tyler Shuck because Spencer Rattler was playing so bad. Shuck didn't look that great, but the Bucs. I mean, Baker Mayfield didn't even have really his best game of the year. They didn't even really necessarily need him most of the games. That's part of it. They got out to lead pretty early, and it was very apparent that they were going to win the game. Then Broncos and the Cowboys. This was a game that I expected to be much closer. As you'll see, I had the Broncos winning it at home, but I had predicted that the Cowboys were going to keep it close. I thought this might be a high-scoring, close game, and it was relatively high-scoring, 68 total points. That is a high-scoring game, but I did not see the Broncos winning this by 20 points. If anything, I felt like the Broncos might win in a semi-low-scoring game, but no, the high-scoring game, the Cowboys' defense just looked horrible. Couldn't do a thing, and that offense, the Cowboys' offense is good, but their defense just can't get off the field, can't help them out. And the Broncos' defense, to its credit, pretty good defense. So you're able to force some takeaways from the Cowboys' offense and a quarterback in Dak Prescott who's been playing pretty good. So the Broncos' defense able to do that, and a Cowboys' defense that can't save anything. Didn't go well. Colts dominate the Titans. Not much of a surprise there. The Colts, they are on a roll. They are the first team since the 2007 New England Patriots with Tom Brady and Randy Moss. They're the first team since then to score 30 or more points in their first 8 games. So this Colts offense really lights out. And a couple interesting facts from some of those past games as well. For that Cowboys-Broncos game, the Cowboys are now 0-8 in the last 8 games against the Broncos. The last time they won against the Broncos was 1995. Another stat that goes back to 1995 is the Browns are 2-12 against the Patriots since 1995. And that Cowboys one, Cowboys-Broncos, that one kind of goes to show what I was talking about of these matchups that are cross-division. Franchises that play each other very, very infrequently. And for the Cowboys against the Broncos, it has not gone very well for them in the last 30 years. And also in that Patriots-Browns game, Myles Garrett, really the highlight for the Browns in that game. Myles Garrett got 5 sacks in the game on Drake May. And Myles Garrett now has the most sacks by a defensive player in NFL history below the age of 30. So, he's on a roll for a young defensive player in his prime. Showed plenty of frustration on the sideline with the Browns, but it's hard to feel too bad for Myles Garrett. He did just sign a big contract this offseason with the Browns, a big contract extension. So he got his money. He had said last year that he wanted to be traded. He made that clear. Dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. Rather than trading Myles Garrett like he wanted and getting a boatload of picks and, other players that the Browns could have gotten. I mean, let's be real, you're not in a place to contend right now. So really, it would have been beneficial for both parties for both the Browns and for Myles Garrett. It would have been beneficial if the Browns hadn't played hardball and tried to keep him. But instead, they played hardball. He gave in, took the money, and now he's frustrated that the Browns aren't doing well. And it's, that's the extension you took. So it's kind of hard to feel bad too much for either the Browns or Myles Garrett there. But, not going too well for them as a team this year, of course. Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football that just wrapped up about an hour ago from when I'm recording this. Both blowout games. One game I was 100% correct on, with the Chiefs beating and dominating the Marcus Mariota-led Washington Commanders, who fall to 3-5. Chiefs are on a roll. They've gotten Xavier Worthy back. They've got Rashee Rice back, and it is making a huge difference. The Chiefs, who started looking not very good this season, they get those two guys back, and this Chiefs offense is back to looking like some of the Chiefs offenses from, the Tyreek Hill days almost. 2 touchdowns for Rashee Rice, a touchdown to Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes willing and dealing like he usually does, and also, like has been the case in the last few years, Chiefs defense playing plenty well as well. Of course, for the Commanders, didn't help that you've got Marcus Mariota in there rather than Jaden Daniels. Although, to be fair, Marcus Mariota didn't play horrible. I'm not saying that he played great or anything. He had 2 interceptions, but Patrick Mahomes had a couple interceptions as well. So, one that was tipped up in the air. Both quarterbacks had that, to be fair, by receivers. But yeah, so the Sunday night game, Packers at the Steelers. This was the Packers Aaron Rodgers revenge game. That was the main storyline and sort of attraction to this game. It certainly wasn't the uniforms for the Steelers. Hideous. If you watched the game, you know what I'm talking about. If you didn't, just imagine a yellow traffic sign that has, black arrows and things like that. That's what the Steelers uniforms looked like. They were hideous. I hope they never wear those things again. As a Bears fan, I totally respect history and honoring it. And the Steelers, like the Bears, are one of those franchises that have plenty of rich history. But those uniforms, which were a reference to Steelers jerseys from basically 100 years ago, I understand the historical significance, but there are some things that there's a reason we don't do the same. There's some things that are best left as memories of the past, and I would say those jerseys are that. And yeah, in those horrible jerseys, Steelers, especially the defense, played pretty horrible. And the Steelers, that's the biggest concern coming out of this game. You have the highest paid defense in the league by far in the Steelers, and they've had back-to-back weeks now of giving up more than 30 points, not looking like they can stop really anything. To be fair, the Green Bay Packers looked really good. Jordan Love looking amazing. Matt LaFleur and that offense. All around, Packers looking really good, even on defense looking pretty good. They've got Micah Parsons, who was playing well. Had an amazing sack that he had. Had some pretty good pass rushes in the night that played an effect. But for the Steelers and for Aaron Rodgers, to his credit, Aaron Rodgers played pretty good. Certainly he shows his age a little bit, but I think at plus 40, that's more than fair. And even for showing that age, Aaron Rodgers still does Aaron Rodgers things, still makes throws that are amazing to watch. Just his knowledge and ability of commanding an offense, reading defenses, really amazing for Aaron Rodgers there. But not the game that you would have wanted if you're Rodgers. Historically, these types of games don't usually go too well for the quarterback in a revenge game against the franchise they played for many years. Usually it goes in favor of that team rather than the quarterback. This week was no different. And then the final game, of course, that I'm going to talk about, Bears at the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, the main drama out of this game has to do with the injury reporting before the game that happened. And that's with the Ravens. Throughout the week, they had marked Lamar Jackson as fully participating. They had listed him as that on the injury report up through, I believe, Friday. They had listed him as fully participating, which by rule, that means that player was a full participant with the first team offense if you're a starter. What came out in reports was that Lamar did end up practicing in full towards the end of the week, but he wasn't working with the first team offense. He was practicing with the scout team offense. So technically, according to the rules for teams with their injury reports, the Ravens were supposed to list Lamar Jackson as limited, not full participation, which they didn't. And then, so basically the whole week leading up, so both for the Bears and for bettors, because that's the thing, sports betting is the main reason the injury report has always been a thing in the NFL. Even going back, however long the NFL has been doing injury reporting, even though sports betting wasn't as popular back then, that's been the main reason the NFL has always had the injury report, is for betting. It's not necessarily been for, your opponent. People often ask what's the point of having an injury report where you're telling your opponent what players are playing and who's not. Why wouldn't you want to hide that? And true, if teams can, they'd rather hide that, but the whole point of the injury report has always been, for the sake of betting and for the sake of the integrity of the game, to make betting as fair as possible. The idea is that teams are required to honestly report important injuries so that, especially for things like player prop bets, which of course this is very relevant in recent news because of what's happened around the NBA with a player and coach getting in some trouble with the federal government, with the FBI, some indictments being handed down, including some player props. In light of that just happening last week, the NFL is going to be, really trying to tighten things up right now, really trying to do everything they can from a PR perspective to prove to everybody that, hey, integrity of our game matters. And so for the Ravens, the NFL has said they're going to be conducting an investigation into the Ravens, and there's a chance that the Ravens get dealt a pretty hefty fine, and it's also possible the Ravens even lose draft picks. Maybe not necessarily plural, but there's a chance that they lose a draft pick, at least get a hefty fine. Those are possible. We'll have to wait and see what the investigation from the NFL ends up deciding, whether or not, because that's the thing. For the Ravens, John Harbaugh claimed in an interview after the game that it was a honest mistake. They hadn't understood the rule, and they had listed Lamar Jackson as full participant because he had been full participating on those days. Just he had been with the scout team offense, and John Harbaugh tried to make it sound like they hadn't understood the caveat that practicing with the scout team offense as the starting quarterback doesn't count as fully participating. I find that a little hard to believe from John Harbaugh. You've been the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens for basically 2 decades now. It's also no secret that the Harbaughs in general as coaches, they are, any coach is, especially in the NFL. They're always trying to find any little advantages they can. And for a Ravens team that was getting pretty desperate, was 1-5 coming into this game. This game really was a must-win for the Ravens in order to save any hope for their season. So, to me, it's a little hard to believe from John Harbaugh that he didn't know that was the rule. And it's kind of weird between Harbaugh and the Ravens making some statements. They made it sound like it was on the medical team or the PR team for messing it up, which is a little weird because many former NFL coaches and even some GMs from around the leagues have said no. Like, coaches are generally very aware of what's going on with their team's injury report. That is something that the head coach is over. So, for John Harbaugh to claim that he and the Ravens didn't realize, or that it was a mistake in reporting by the medical staff or something, I don't really believe it. I think the Ravens were trying to I don't necessarily think they were trying to harm the integrity of the game, but I think they were trying to mess with the Bears a little bit. You can argue about how much of an advantage it would have been or not, but if you think about it, for the Bears or for any team preparing, especially in the NFL, the level of work that these teams go through each week, the staffs and the players go through from film study to practice, and especially with the staff, the endless hours they spend going over film for every team, depending on the players and things. Especially when you have a top quarterback like Lamar Jackson. If the film for the Ravens that the Bears are going to want to be studying is going to be different for Lamar Jackson than it is for Tyler Huntley, Snoop Huntley starting, or Cooper Rush even. So, for the Bears, they spent basically this whole week practicing for Lamar Jackson to be starting, and actually the timing too of the Lamar Jackson actually being out was a little fishy too, because it didn't come out until Saturday morning that Lamar was going to be out. And many of the Bears players talked about the fact that the way they found out that Lamar was going to be out was the same as all of us. They saw it on notifications on their phone, and it was just after they had gone through their Saturday walkthroughs. So by that point, Bears completely done with their practices, all practices, walkthroughs through the week. They just get done with those, and that's when they then find out, oh, Lamar Jackson is out. So whole week the Bears prepared for Lamar Jackson to be starting rather than Tyler Huntley. Again, you can argue about how much of a difference that makes for the teams, but the reason the NFL might end up coming down hard on the Ravens and John Harbaugh, maybe somewhat because of that, but for the most part, if they do hand down any punishment to the Ravens, it's going to be because of the sports gambling stuff that's going on right now, and the NFL is going to want to make an example out of the Ravens, assuming they do find that there was, especially if they do find that there was anything to suggest intent by the Ravens to do it like that. That there could be a punishment to try to make an example out of the Ravens and to try to say, hey, look at us. We're the NFL. We protect the integrity of our game. Matters to us. We don't want our games being rigged or the betting to be rigged. That's going to be the goal of handing down any punishment to the Ravens. But yeah, as far as this game that goes, though, obviously as a Bears fan, I'm disappointed. And again, I want to reiterate, I am not in any way trying to put this injury reporting stuff. I don't put really any blame on that for the Bears losing this. Maybe it played a factor a bit in the Bears' preparation, but I don't think that's at all an excuse. The Bears got shellacked in this game. As you'll see here on ESPN, the spread that shows here is plus 6.5. Now, it had been that all week leading up to the game when it was reported that Lamar was going to be playing. And this is why this is important specifically for the betting, because if you're betting on player prop bets to do with Lamar Jackson, or you're betting simply against the spread, for basically the entire week, the spread was the Ravens favored by 6.5, with the assumption that Lamar Jackson was coming back. So I know there are a lot of sharp bettors, even expert NFL bettors, that were betting the Ravens to cover the 6.5. Luckily for them, the Bears still crapped the bed, still couldn't beat the Ravens, even with Snoop Huntley starting. But the thing is, the second that Lamar injury report got updated on Saturday to him being out, this line instantly moved from 6.5 to 2.5 for the Bears. So, and at times it had actually been up to 7 during the week. So that was a 5-point swing just because of the Lamar Jackson injury news. So obviously for a lot of those people that had placed bets on the Ravens covering 6.5, there would have been a lot of people outraged had the Bears ended up winning or covering the 6.5, because say the Bears only lost by 4 points, those people that bet the minus 6.5 would have lost their bet, and arguably unfairly so, because they bet it with the assumption that Lamar was going to be playing. So that's why the reporting thing matters, is for the betting. For the Bears, there's some valid concerns at this point for the offense. The Ravens, they came in, and that defense hasn't played well all year. Now, they did get a couple key players back, including Roquan Smith, former Chicago Bear, who had some good plays. And I do think the Ravens defense in the last couple weeks does look like it's maybe slightly improving from what it started as this season, which was bottom defense in the league. So I think there's a little improvement from the Ravens defense, but I think more of the story was the Bears offense. And especially with Caleb Williams, the unfortunate thing as a Bears fan right now this season is Caleb Williams just hasn't shown enough flash for what I'd like. I've said it many times coming into this season and earlier on. As a Bears fan, obviously I'd love wins, but what I came into this season wanting to see was Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson in that offense clicking. Wanted to see Caleb Williams progressing and getting, showing flashes and looking like he was starting to get this Ben Johnson offense. And it's just not happening. The last couple weeks we saw with the run game, we're starting to see with the run game, the Ben Johnson offense starting to develop, but it's the pass game for the Bears. It's just not there. Caleb certainly has a lot of talent, but he's gone 2 weeks in a row now where he's not done good at. He's had 3 interceptions, I believe, in the last 2 weeks. No touchdowns thrown this week. And he's just, again, he's a very talented, athletic player, but he just doesn't seem to see the field very well. I don't know what that is as far as just not knowing how to get through the progressions well, reading defenses, whatever it is. Caleb struggles to do that and get the ball out in a fast manner to the open designed receivers on any given play. And then also, whenever Caleb does get a throw off, whether it's from outside of the pocket or inside of it, Caleb has some accuracy issues. And oddly enough, he's really good at the long ball for the most part. If it's a super long pass, and especially on the run, Caleb often gets those just fine. But it's passes that are shorter than 20 yards, it's not uncommon for Caleb to be selling a pass way over the receiver's head, or for the pass to be slightly behind, or things like that. Saw a few of those in key moments this week. And so that's the biggest concern for the Bears offense. They just couldn't get a rhythm going. The start of the game, they came out, looked just fine while they were on script. But once they got off the scripted plays in the beginning part of the game, it turned around, and the momentum quickly swapped to the Ravens, and it really never went back the other way. But it's not all on Caleb Williams, though. It's also on this Bears defense, which is depleted in the secondary with injuries, and had some more injuries up front as well. And I've said it week in and week out, this is Bears defense that I think is very lacking up front, especially on the defensive line. But it's a defense that had been doing pretty well so far this season at creating takeaways, and the Bears actually do still rank first in the league at takeaways. But the problem is takeaways are great, but you do also need to just be able to get stops, just stopping teams on second and third down, forcing them to punt every once in a while. And when the Bears aren't creating turnovers, not very good at stopping offenses, giving up a lot of field goals and a lot of touchdowns. As far as pass defense, run defense, yardage-wise, the Bears' defense is like worst in the league, in pretty close to worst in the league in both metrics, and especially with running the ball. Teams are running for I think it's 5.6 yards per play against the Bears defense. So they weren't able to create the same amount of turnovers this week, and so not able to get stops conventionally. And so, all around, Bears offense couldn't get in rhythm. Run game got stopped a little bit. And then on defense, just unable to get stops enough, unable to create turnovers this weekend. And then the other part for the Bears was penalties. The Bears are also really struggling this year with penalties. It's something that they've struggled for years with now, but this year, still not a whole ton different. Had a lot of key penalties. Ended up having 11 this week against the Ravens, which was unfortunate in some key moments. So for the Bears, it's a plentiful amount of reasons as to why they lost this game. And again, I wouldn't even have if I had to rank reasons as to why the Bears lost against the Ravens this week, the injury reporting stuff with the Ravens would be not even on the list, and if it was, it would be at the bottom. So again, I'm not trying to use that as an excuse at all. Another small thing, there was some bad officiating at a couple points, but again, I hate using officiating as an excuse because there's calls that goes both ways. Again, in some games, like with the Eagles-Giants game this week, sure, some officiating snafus that are maybe a little bit more obvious, a little bit bigger. And again, as a Bears fan, I will say the last 2-3 weeks, there have been some calls that haven't gone the Bears' way that have kind of been annoying. But again, I'm never going to use that as a key excuse for the team not doing well. And certainly in a game like this, losing 30-16, again, the first quarter, Bears looked great. Outside of that, pretty lifeless, not very good. So penalties, certainly not a valid excuse for why the Bears lost. And now, to be fair, one thing I did want to show really quick before I end this video is my predictions for the Bears so far this season. Again, I know the spreadsheet's a little hard to see, so I'll highlight this row here. This is the Chicago Bears. And my predictions for the Bears games so far this season, the predictions I set for the Bears in the preseason have been 100% correct. So you'll see the key down here. But for games that I have picked that have already happened, the losses that I predicted that were right are yellow. The wins that I predicted correctly are in light blue. And then, any games I got wrong. So if I predicted a win and I was wrong, it goes to purple. If I predicted an L and I was wrong, it goes to orange. But so you'll see here for the Bears, for the games that they have played so far, it's all yellow and blue. And of course, if you want to fact check this, go ahead and watch my preseason predictions video. You'll see the games that I had marked for the Bears to win and lose, I've been 100% on so far. So, which I do think is pretty funny because I have been wrong at least once. If I've got a record listed here, that means for each of those teams, I've at least been wrong on one game for each team. The Bears are the only one that I don't have a record right here for, and that's because I haven't had to create a adjusted record based off of what I got wrong. I've been exactly correct on all Bears games this year so far. At least my preseason predictions were. So if that is the case, that means my preseason predictions have the Bears losing on the road again this next week against the Cincinnati Bengals, which I hate to say it right now, I think is quite possible. Now, what prediction am I going to make for the Bears this week? I'm not sure. We'll see. As a fan, it'll be hard to not let my bias get in the way and make me pick in the moment that the Bears are going to win. But yeah, based off of my preseason predictions for the Bears, which have been 100% correct, if you want to bet the Bears this week, bet against them. Bet the Bengals to win it. So, second game on the road, all the concerns that I underlined this week for the Bears. Bengals having a pretty high-powered offense, even with Joe Flacco. Bears defense struggling to get stops. It's certainly possible. I expect this Bears-Bengals game to be very high scoring, and it's going to come down to which defense can either get stops or, for the Bears, maybe create some turnovers, which, to be fair to Joe Flacco, he's played pretty clean. So, if he can continue to play clean and the Bengals can maybe get a couple stops on defense, maybe focus on the Bears' running attack, I'm concerned that the Bears might lose this one on the road. So we'll have to see. This isn't my predictions episode. This is a reactions to Week 8. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you. Leave a like on the video, and I will see you in the next video.